What unfolded during this congressional hearing went far beyond routine questioning. This was not a scripted exchange. It was not political theater. It was a moment that escalated in real time, right in front of the cameras. A senior lawmaker pressed the Treasury Secretary with a direct question. The question was simple. It required only a yes or a no, but the answer never came. The issue centered on a Trump-linked crypto venture, foreign investment tied to a U.S. partner nation, and growing concerns about whether financial regulators may be facing pressure behind closed doors. The lawmaker invoked history, reminding the room that when political power, private money, and financial oversight collide, the consequences are rarely abstract. They land on consumers, taxpayers, and public trust. As the response remained unclear, the tone of the hearing shifted. Voices rose. Time limits blurred. The chair was forced to intervene repeatedly. What began as oversight turned into confrontation, and what was supposed to be a standard hearing became a moment that demanded attention. This is no longer just about crypto. It is about accountability, transparency, and the boundaries between government authority and private interests. Now watch the clip first. After that, we will break it down.
You were working in the financial service industry during the late 1980s, correct?
I was.
Thank you. And well, I'm wondering, do you recall or you're knowledgeable of the Keating 5 scandal back then?
Yes, sir. And I will point out that I was.
I don't want to.
No. I will point out that
limited time. I have limited time.
I identified.
The gentleman is from the Secretary. Is the gentleman from New York Times?
So I just want to make sure that everyone knows, who doesn't know, that the Keating 5 scandal involved 5 U.S. senators accused of pressuring the Federal Home Loan Bank Board to expedite and give more consideration to the case of Charles Keating, Jr., who ran the California-based Lincoln Savings and Loans. It led to a 14-month investigation unveiling how 5 U.S. senators and staff ended up with more than $1 million in contributions, 4 trips to the Bahamas, and all expenses paid stays at resort hotels. Following the scandal, the industry saw sweeping regulatory changes that was launched by then-President George H.W. Bush. Now, Mr. Secretary, I'm sure you can agree conflicts of interest and improper influence by U.S. elected officials over bank regulators weaken supervisory independence and ultimately impose massive losses on consumers and taxpayers. I think that we can all agree upon that. And as we know, the basic lessons from the post-Keating reforms still applies today when the Office of the Comptroller of Currency, the OCC, deciding to get a bank charter. I think we can stimulate that. Now, Mr. Bessent, as our nation's treasurer, I'm sure you also know that a foreign-linked investment firm tied to the United Arab Emirates government quietly bought about half of the Trump family's crypto company, World Liberty Financial. And at the very same time, the President of the United States was dealing with that country on foreign policy. Now, Eric Trump, the president's son and co-founder of World Liberty Financial, said, and I quote, "I'm not going to get into who the investors are, but I've got some pretty meaningful investors," end of quote. Lack of transparency. And it didn't end there. When Trump fans brought the tokens, they thought they were getting the deal of a century. But what they didn't know was that only Trump and his sons had the sole power to decide who can sell the token and when. Today, the price of the token has fallen over 50%, and the Trump fans who bought the token are now begging to get out. Now, I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. You can see it for yourself on the World Liberty Financial Discussion Forum, yourself, Mr. Secretary. So this is no longer just about a shady crypto deal or a possible gift when a foreign-linked investor is putting hundreds of millions of dollars into a company controlled by the president's family, and at the same time, this president is conducting foreign policy with that country. You know what that creates? It creates a national security concern. So, I'm not going to ask much of you, Mr. Secretary. I just want to know whether you will commit today to pause and heighten the scrutiny of any bank charter or licensing application at the OCC connected to the World Liberty Financial until all of these conflicts of interest and foreign influence reviews are completed and shared with the United States Congress. All I need to know is, will you halt it and do a complete investigation and scrutiny of this licensing application? All you have to ask is yes or no.
No, Congressman.
All you have to ask is yes or no.
The OCC is an independent entity, and I would know, Congressman,
I take that as a no.
You traveled to Venezuela to lobby
I take that as a no.
On behalf of
I take that as a no.
On behalf of your donors.
You do not want to answer that question. I take that as a no.
For a $7 billion
Gentlemen's time
I'm asking you to do your responsibility as Secretary of the Treasury.
Into a Venezuelan
You do not.
Mr. Meeks,
Will you?
time has expired.
You cannot erase what you did in 2006.
He's the one that went past your time, Mr. Chairman.
No, and
he did not answer my question, and he wouldn't pass the
Mr.
time.
Meeks. He had 6 seconds left to try to answer your question, and the
It was a yes or no. It was a yes or no answer. I asked him, will he? No, was that yes or no?
The OCC is an independent.
Stop covering for the president. Stop being his flunky.
Gentlemen.
He's talking to me. I'm responding back to him.
2006 trip to Venezuela.
Stop covering for the president. Don't be a flunky. Work for the American people.
Mr. Meeks,
trip to Venezuela.
Work for the American people. Don't be a cover-up for a mob.
Maybe you're going to see your friend Nicholas Maduro.
I will.
Gentleman is not recognized. Mr. Bessent, please. I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Sessions.
What needs to be understood first is what this hearing was actually about, beyond the raised voices and the sharp exchanges. This was not simply a clash of personalities. It was a dispute over process, authority, and the boundaries that are supposed to exist between political power and financial regulation in the United States. At the center of the confrontation was a basic question. When a financial entity with ties to the sitting president's family becomes connected to foreign-linked investment, how should federal regulators respond? And more specifically, should that process be paused or slowed until potential conflicts of interest are fully reviewed and disclosed to Congress? The lawmaker pressing the issue framed the argument around historical precedent. He pointed to the Keating 5 scandal as a reminder of what happens when elected officials exert improper influence over banking regulators. In that case, pressure placed on regulators to benefit a politically connected financial institution ultimately led to widespread losses, taxpayer-funded bailouts, and long-lasting damage to public trust in the financial system. The reference was not accidental. It was intended to establish that this was not a hypothetical concern or an abstract ethical debate. It was a lesson drawn from documented history. The core message was simple. When regulators lose independence, ordinary people pay the price. From the perspective of the Treasury Secretary, the response followed a familiar institutional line. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency operates as an independent regulator. Its decisions, including whether to grant or deny bank charters or licenses, are meant to be insulated from political interference. That independence is designed to protect the system from precisely the kind of pressure being discussed. This is where the tension became visible. The lawmaker was not asking whether the OCC is formally independent. That fact is not in dispute. The question was whether heightened scrutiny should be applied in a case where the appearance of conflict is unusually strong. Independence on paper does not eliminate the need for caution when circumstances raise red flags. The issue of foreign investment added another layer of complexity. When capital tied to a foreign government or foreign-linked entity flows into a business controlled by the family of a sitting president, it creates a potential overlap between private financial interests and national policy decisions. Even if no wrongdoing occurs, the perception alone can undermine confidence in the integrity of decision-making. This is why the lawmaker repeatedly emphasized national security concerns. Financial leverage can translate into political influence. That does not require explicit quid pro quo arrangements. It can operate through access, expectations, and unspoken assumptions. In sensitive areas like banking, crypto regulation, and financial oversight, those dynamics matter. The hearing also exposed a broader issue about transparency in emerging financial sectors. Crypto ventures operate in a regulatory environment that is still evolving. Rules are often fragmented. Oversight is shared among multiple agencies. This creates gaps where accountability can become unclear. In this case, investors reportedly lacked clarity about when and how they could exit their positions. Control over token sales was concentrated in the hands of insiders. As prices declined, frustration among retail participants grew. Whether those design choices were legal is a separate question from whether they were ethical or prudent. The lawmaker's argument was not that the Treasury Secretary personally approved or orchestrated these arrangements. Instead, the focus was on responsibility. As the head of the Treasury Department, the Secretary plays a central role in shaping regulatory priorities, tone, and enforcement posture across the financial system. By asking for a pause and enhanced scrutiny, the lawmaker was seeking acknowledgement that extraordinary circumstances warrant extraordinary caution. A temporary halt does not imply guilt. It signals seriousness. It communicates that conflicts of interest will be examined before irreversible decisions are made. The refusal to give a simple yes or no answer escalated the exchange. Time constraints in congressional hearings are rigid. When answers drift beyond the allotted window, frustration builds quickly. In this case, the insistence on a binary response became symbolic. It was not just about the content of the answer, it was about accountability in real time. The chair's intervention underscored how procedural rules can collide with substantive concerns. Hearings are designed to balance order with inquiry. When emotions rise, that balance becomes difficult to maintain. The repeated use of the gavel signaled that the process itself was under strain. What viewers should take away is not the volume of the argument, but the substance beneath it. This exchange reflects a deeper uncertainty about how the United States should regulate complex financial products while maintaining ethical boundaries at the highest levels of power. It also highlights the limits of existing frameworks. Independence of regulators is necessary, but it is not sufficient on its own. Transparency, disclosure, and proactive review are equally important, especially when political families and foreign capital intersect. Another critical point is that this debate did not emerge in isolation. It is part of a broader pattern of congressional scrutiny over crypto markets, foreign investment, and the influence of money in politics. Across party lines, lawmakers have expressed concern that regulatory structures have not kept pace with financial innovation. However, the partisan context cannot be ignored. Accusations of bias, cover-ups, and political motivation are now routine in Washington. That reality makes it harder for legitimate oversight efforts to be received as neutral or constructive. Every question is filtered through assumptions about intent. This is why hearings like this one often feel chaotic. They operate at the intersection of law, politics, media, and public perception. Each participant is speaking not only to the room, but to voters, supporters, critics, and future investigators. The long-term implications will depend on what happens next. Will additional disclosures be requested? Will regulators voluntarily increase transparency? Will Congress pursue follow-up hearings or legislative changes? Those outcomes remain uncertain. What is clear is that the issue will not disappear. Financial relationships involving political families attract scrutiny by definition. When foreign entities are involved, that scrutiny intensifies. And when new financial instruments like crypto are added to the mix, the complexity multiplies. For the public, the key question is trust. Trust that regulators act independently. Trust that political leaders avoid conflicts of interest. Trust that financial markets operate under fair and enforceable rules. Once trust erodes, restoring it is difficult. This hearing, with all its tension and disruption, was a visible reminder of that fragile balance. It showed how quickly unresolved questions can escalate into confrontation. And it demonstrated why oversight, even when uncomfortable, remains a central feature of democratic governance. As this story continues to develop, attention will shift from the tone of the exchange to the substance of the response. Actions taken behind the scenes will matter more than words spoken during a heated moment. If this analysis helped you understand what was really at stake in that hearing, make sure to subscribe for clear, fact-based breakdowns of major political moments.